Hey, welcome back. In this video, I want to talk about integrating Microsoft Cloud App Security with a SaaS app. Now, when I say integration, what I mean by that is really two different things. The first thing is configuring what we call an app connector to connect to that app via this shared API is the way I like to think of it, and being able to enforce governance controls and policy directly within an app. So being able to encrypt data, prevent files from being shared, so on and so forth. The second type of integration is what we call Conditional Access App Control. And that's where we can actually block a download from happening, for example. So if you're using the browser-based version of that app, we could apply session control. Now, this video is going to be a little lengthier than what I normally do. And so I put on a hoodie here to get comfy. And we're going to go through this together step by step. I'm going to put a table of contents down the video description so you can skip ahead if you like. Now, it's worth noting before we get started, please read the documentation and reference it. It will explain how to do all of this step by step, so this video supplements that. And then also, these APIs are constantly changing, the capabilities are constantly changing. So keep up to speed on that documentation if you want to know what the latest and greatest is. The last thing I'm going to mention is what I'm about to show you with Google Workspace as our example app. This is going to vary from app to app because those APIs will vary because they're all different app vendors. Okay, let's go ahead and get started and jump right into it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is log into the Cloud App Security portal, click on the sunglasses, and then choose Connected Apps. And then you can see I've already got some apps connected. I'm just going to click on Connect an App under App Connectors and choose Google Workspace. We're going to use that for our demonstration today. And I'm going to give this a name. So I'm going to call this SOSMAN Demo Lab YouTube. Oh, actually, let's make it a little shorter. Let's call this SOSMAN YouTube Demo and then click on Connect. Now, the next part here is where we need to fill out some fields. Now we have to go over to the Google side and create some of these items. So we're going to leave this open, but we're going to leverage the documentation for this. So the documentation is actually really well done. It looks something like this. And I'm going to follow it step by step. And as I go through it, I'll tell you what step I'm on. So if you want to follow along on your side, feel free to do so. So what we're going to do is bring up the Google side. And I already have that open, so let me pull that up here for you. And in the documentation, I'm just going to start with protect Google Workspace and configure Google Workspace right here. So I went to cloud.google.com/console/project, which brought me here. So we need to first create a project. So step 2 is click Create Project to start a new project. Step 3, in the new project page, name your project as follows. So I'm going to call mine Cloud App Security, and I'm just going to call it Feb 21, and then click Create. And then once it's created, step 4 is we're going to click on Google Cloud Platform. So we'll give that a moment to create. Okay, it's done. So now we're going to click on Google Cloud Platform. And okay, that's fine. That was left over from a previous demo. And we're going to choose our project we just created. So there's Cloud App Security. Perfect. So now we need to go to APIs. I'm going to click on the menu, go to API and Services, and then click on Dashboard. And I'm on step 5 in the instructions here. So let's go ahead and choose Enable API and Services. And we're going to enable 4 APIs, starting with the Admin SDK API. So we're just going to do a search, click on it, then choose Enable. And we're going to do this for each one. The next one is the Audit API. So we'll just go back a couple pages here. Audit API, there it is. Choose Enable. The next one is Google Drive API. So find Google Drive API, choose Enable. And the next one is Google Workspace Marketplace SDK. So let's go back, paste him in, and then choose Enable. So in the documentation, I am now just completing step 5 where we enabled the APIs. I'm going to move on to step 6. This is where you can just verify the API has been enabled. I'm going to skip over that step because they're already enabled. And in step 7, we're going to do OAuth. So we're going to go back to the API and services page, and we're going to choose OAuth consent page or OAuth consent screen. And I'm going to choose external and then click on create. And we're going to give this a name. So I'm going to call this Microsoft Cloud App Security Feb 21. And then user support email, choose that. Not going to do a logo or anything like that. And I'm just going to type in my email address. There we go. Whoops. Do that one more time. Sorry about that. There we go. And at this point, we should be good. So I'm just going to click on Save and Continue. Under Scopes, leave Scopes the default. Save and Continue. Test users. Nope. Save and Continue summary. And we're ready to rock and roll. Okay. So now we're on step 8 of the documentation. So now we're going to go to Credentials and choose Create Credentials. And we're going to create a service account. Under service account name, give it a name. So I'm just going to call it MCAS. What am I going to call this? MCAS Feb 21 SA for service account. And description, MCAS service account. And then click on create. All right. And then we're going to click continue. Actually, before I click continue, let me back up. Step 2, we need to grant this service account access to the project. So under role, we're going to scroll through this and find project. There it is. And then under project, we're going to choose editor. And then click continue. And leave that blank. And click done. All right. So now we're on step 9 where we need to manipulate the account here. So under service accounts, locate the service account you just created and make a copy of the email address. Okay, so let's bring up a scratch pad here and let's copy out the email address. And there's my phone. All right, so let's copy that email address and paste it in our scratch pad. There we go. And then under keys, we are going to click add key, create new key, choose P12, click create, and then that's going to get downloaded. So there we go. Click close. And then we need to enable G Suite domain-wide delegation. All right. And then click save. Okay. Perfect. Now we need to go over to admin.google.com. And get signed in. And then under security, find API controls. And then under API controls, choose manage domain-wide delegation. And then add new. And then in the instructions here, we are on step 11, letter B. Actually, letter A. So in the client ID box, enter the client ID that you copied earlier. I guess I didn't copy the client ID. Whoops, let's go back. So let's go back to here. There's the client ID. So back in our OAuth screen, we're going to copy the client ID. I'm just going to paste this in my scratch pad. And then now we need to go paste it in here. So there's the client ID. And then OAuth scopes, we're just going to copy everything from the article here and paste it, and then click authorize. Okay, now the last thing I need to do, this is not in the documentation, but I've done this enough times and I have enough experience with it. It is needed. We're going to go back to the first page where we saw the projects. So I'm just going to browse back to cloud.google.com here, get logged in, go to my resource manager where I can see my projects, and then click on my project. And I'm going to choose my project here that we created earlier, but I'm going to click on the little 3 dots and I'm going to choose settings, and I'm going to copy out this project number and put it in my scratch pad because we will need that later. Okay, so I think we're ready to go. So we did really 2 things here. 3 things. We created a project, okay? And then after we created the project, we went over to APIs and we enabled all the APIs. The third thing we did was we created an OAuth consent screen, and then we created a service account. We downloaded a certificate. We enabled domain-wide delegation over in G Suite or Google Workspace. So now we're ready to rock and roll. So now let's go back to Cloud App Security and let's enter in this information. So the service account ID is this long email address. The project number is what we just copied. And then the certificate, and just uploaded the certificate. We're going to give it the admin account of my Google Workspace tenant. It is a business and enterprise account. I don't think you could do this with a personal account. I could be wrong, but I don't think they allow access to the APIs with that. And then we're going to click on Save. And then we've got this little link here, Connect as Google Workspace Administrator and allow the required permission. So let's go ahead and click on that. And looks like it's still trying to load. There we go. And now we're logged in under my admin account. Perfect. So at this point, I think we're ready to rock and roll. Scroll down here. There it is. SOSMIN YouTube demo. You can see I've done this a few other times, just playing around in my lab. So what I'm going to do now is click on Test Now, and this is going to test our connection. So let's let this cook for a little bit, and we'll come back in a few moments, and we'll see if it's successful. Okay, so we now see that it has a status of connected. The test was successful. Now, I want to point something out. It is going to take a little bit of time for it to go through and scan data in Google Workspace. So you got to give it some time for that. I have a very small lab environment. There's almost no users, no data. So it's probably going to happen fairly quickly here in the next few hours. If you had a large enterprise environment, this could take some time. And this is covered in the documentation down here at the very end. It'll walk you through this. Now, if you have any issues, come in the documentation and look at these troubleshooting app connectors. This is a great table that will list out the error message you will get based on the app. So if you just scroll down here, when I did this the other day, I goofed myself. And I'll tell you what I did wrong here. But if we just go in here to Google Workspace, I had a 401 unauthorized. Turns out I didn't have a license in Google Workspace assigned to my user. That's what happened. Once I signed the license, it worked. So if you have any issues, just reference this troubleshooting article in the documentation. It's great. Now, let's jump over to MCAS here. Let's just do a quick page refresh for good measure. And we will see Google Workspace is connected. And we can see it's, look at that. Real-time scan status is up to date. It's probably still doing some scanning here on accounts. So if I flip over to activity log and filter on Google Workspace, there we go. It's starting to already feed data into it. So now let's talk a little bit more about what you can do now that the app is connected using that app connector. Okay, so you can see that Google Workspace is indeed connected to Microsoft Cloud App Security. So let me show you what you can do with it now that it's connected. I'm going to click on the sunglasses and I'm going to start with Activity Log. This allows me to view all of the activities for Google Workspace in MCAS. And so here you can see I've got a few activities. This is where somebody was editing an internal presentation. And when I click on it, it expands it and shows me some telemetry here about what's happening with it. I can see where they're logging in from. If I come down here, I can see that somebody's changed permissions on a file. And it looks like they even gave somebody externally access to it. We'll come back to that here in a second. I can see where somebody went to go edit the file, rename it, changed it. All operations are audited in Google Workspace. Pretty cool. I could see where somebody went to go create the file. Check this out. Somebody changed the single sign-on settings. Look at that. Going through this, somebody changed a license. Everything is audited in Google Workspace. And I can even see where they're logging in from. I can see information about that user's account. Does it match any other alerts? I can even go to their user page here. I can even suspend the user account. I can revoke their privileges if I wanted to. If I look up their user here, I can see if they have any open alerts, which is kind of cool. And then I can see information about the IP address that they're logging in from. And I can even tag it or mark it as a risky IP and blacklist it. So that's pretty cool. So that's being able to view the activity log for Google Workspace. Now, if I come over here to the sunglasses and I click on OAuth apps, actually before we do that, if I click on files, this is where I can see all the file operations of Google Workspace, and that's being audited. So if I just filter on Google Cloud, there's everything. And if we start with this first one, here I can see that it matched a policy. I'll show you more on policies in a second. I even have a URL to where that file is stored. So if we click on that URL, there it is. It opens it right up inside Google Drive. If I go back here and I can see that, look at that, one collaborator. When I click on that, it looks like somebody shared it externally with an external domain. That's risky, obviously. And it matched a policy. If I click on the ellipsis, I can delete the file. I can remove ownership, remove that collaborator. So I can see all the operations within these files happening inside Google Workspace right within MCAS. And what I like about this is if I have multiple apps that I have filtered on, then I can do some cool stuff like tell me all of the files that have been shared externally. Boom. There you go, right? I can set some more advanced filters here and do whatever my heart's content. So this is being able to see all file level activity inside Google Workspace and be able to manipulate them with those files if I needed to. If we come over here to OAuth apps under the sunglasses, this is where I can view what OAuth apps have been installed in Google Workspace. So in my lab here, there's just Dropbox and Azure Active Directory. And when I click on one of these apps, I can see the permissions that app has to Google Workspace. And then from here, I can either approve it or I can ban that OAuth app and then nobody inside Google Workspace can actually use it. So that's interesting and useful. And imagine if I had hundreds of OAuth apps in here, I can see, well, which users are using those OAuth apps. I can go through and filter on permission level. I can perform all sorts of advanced queries here to then go through and audit it and see, is it something I want to allow or something I want to block? Now, the last thing I could do with the connector here is create policies. This is the best part about MCAS. And so here I've gone through and created some policies to discover data across Google Workspace. So I have a file policy that's searching across Google Workspace. And if it finds anything related to my Mark 8 project, maybe it just contains a keyword of Mark 8, then create an alert and then apply some kind of governance action. And that governance action could be, mark the file as private. If I had this turned on, apply an Azure Information Protection classification label, go through and remove external access, so on and so forth. Maybe, quarantine it. There's all sorts of stuff I could do here. So that's pretty cool, being able to create a file policy to go do something in Google Workspace. Let me go back and show you another one I created. Here's one around Social Security number and PII. So it's looking at Google Workspace. It's using the data classification service, and it's using a sensitive information type Social Security number. And I can set some advanced settings here if I wanted to. I could also choose another inspection type. Maybe it's a document, fingerprint. Maybe it's exact data match, trainable classifier. Maybe it's a preset sensitive information type, and search through that app. And if we find anything related to Mark 8, then create an alert and then perform some kind of an action. Maybe it's maybe it's removing the file altogether, or maybe it's notifying somebody, whatever your requirements dictate. So I could create these policies for a lot of different things in Google Workspace. So I have a document here that I'll put a link in the video description that describes how you can use some of these different policies with Google Workspace. Check it out: impossible travel, activity from an infrequent country, unusual administrative activities, unusual file deletion, ransomware detection in Google Workspace. A lot of great stuff here. Applying data governance controls like I talked about before. Being able to apply user governance like a suspend the user account in Google Workspace. Pretty awesome. So this is what happens when you have the app connector connected, is you can audit all activity, audit all files, manipulate OAuth apps that have been connected, block it, approve it, and then create policies and govern data in Google Workspace. Now let me show you what Conditional Access App Control is and how you can use that. Okay, Conditional Access App Control, or Session Control as it's also known. I have a great video all about it. Look up in the corner there and you can see a link to it if you want to watch it. I'm not going to go deep into Conditional Access App Control in this video, but I want to show you how you can use it with Google Workspace. So here's the fine print. If you're using Azure Active Directory as your single sign-on provider, as your identity provider for Google Workspace, then there's going to be a two-step process. One, we're going to create a conditional access policy in Azure AD, and then we're going to create a session policy over here in MCAS. If I'm using a third-party IDP and single sign-on provider for Google Workspace, maybe it's Google itself, maybe it's Okta or whoever, then I would simply click the plus sign, and I would go through this wizard to be able to add it to my third-party IDP. Folks, this requires single sign-on to be configured. And when I go through and start adding this, let's type it in. When I add this, it's going to give me a little wizard for being able to interact and integrate this with my third-party IDP. I do not need to do this if I have Azure Active Directory. So what we're going to do is configure this and get it set up and integrated. So I'm going to go over to Azure Active Directory because in my environment, that's my identity provider. And I'm going to add Google Workspace as an enterprise app. Now I've already done that. So if I click on Enterprise Applications and I go to Google Cloud, this is the connector that has already been configured. If I go to single sign-on, SAML configuration's already set up. And I've already got my signing certificate and everything's ready to go. And then I've even enabled automated user provisioning as well. And then I assigned a user access to log in. Now, once I've done all of this, single sign-on is ready to go. Again, if I'm using a third-party IDP, then I would use this wizard to be able to do basically the same thing. Now, if I come back over to Azure AD, I'm going to click on Conditional Access, and we're going to create a Conditional Access policy. So we're going to call this Google Workspace Session Control. And I'm going to choose to apply this to my user, Matt Sosman. And then I'm going to choose to apply it to Google. So there it is. And then conditions, I'm going to leave blank. And then under grant, I'm going to grant access and require MFA. And then under session, I'm going to choose use conditional access app control. And I'm going to choose custom policy. That way I can have multiple policies be applied and have it be a little bit more smarter and dynamic and intelligent than if I were to just choose one of these pre-built ones. I'm going to use custom policy and select and click on select. And then I'm going to choose to proceed with the selected configuration and enable it. Okay, now that it's enabled, we're going to open up an in private window. We're going to log into Google Workspace. So bear with me here. There's my Azure AD sign-in page. It redirects me. So let's do my login. And then it's going to ask me for MFA. right, and get signed in here. Now, immediately what happens is it signs me in, and we're ready to go. Now, the reason why I did this is so the app shows up in MCAS. So let me close out of it. Let me switch back to MCAS, and I'm going to refresh this page. And there's Google Workspace, and now it shows up. So now I can create policies with it. So let's go over to policies, create session policies rather. So let's go over to policies, click on conditional access, and we're going to create a session policy. And so I'm going to say block downloads from non-managed devices. And our session control type is going to be control file download. And then our filter is already set for us. Device tag does not equal one of these. So if you do not have a valid certificate, you're not hybrid Azure AD joined or joined to Active Directory on-prem, and you're not Intune managed, and if you're using Google Cloud, then apply the policy. And the policy is going to block file downloads. Now, I can also inspect it for sensitive data. So I could say, okay, when you try to download a file, if it contains a credit card number or something, PII or whatever, intellectual property, doesn't matter what it is. If it contains something sensitive, then block it, but allow me to download everything else. So you can get very selective with this. Or you could say protect and say, look, apply a Azure Information Protection label to it, apply DLP to it. So you can download it to a personal machine, but it's encrypted. And so at that point, it's protected. But I'm just going to say block for demo purposes here. And we're going to put in our message here, not allowed per IT policy. And we're going to create an alert, and then we're going to click on create to create the policy. Okay, so now that that's created, let's go over here and test it again. So let's open up a new and private window. Let's go to mail.google.com. I need to turn off caps lock and get signed in. MFA, approve, Face ID, and look at that. So a couple things I want to point out. Number one, up in the address bar, cas.ms is the domain name. So that tells me it's being proxied through Microsoft Cloud App Security. Second thing, I get a splash page. This is configurable. But I like to tell my users that, hey, we're monitoring all your access. Now, that's because I'm coming in from a non-managed device. If this was a managed device based on my policy set, then this wouldn't happen. Continue to Google Workspace. And notice up in the address bar, we're still being proxied through mcas.ms. And we're going to go to Google Drive, and we're going to try to download a file out of my Google Drive. So zoom in here a little bit, click on the waffle, and then click on Drive. And then we're going to click on employee data. There you can see a social security number is actually in there. In fact, if we launch this, check it out, there's a fake social security number. If we just zoom in a little bit here so we can see what we're doing, and then choose file and then download, I'm going to download this. Look at that. Download is blocked. And there's my custom message. Now, I do have a little notepad file that I tried to download, but it's just telling me that, hey, it was blocked and it's not allowed. So I cannot download this file. That's that policy we just created. So now if we come back here to MCAS, let's edit that policy. Now, we did control file download with inspection. So now let's change this up a little bit. Let's say we're going to inspect it and using built-in DLP, and if it contains the keywords mark 8, then block it. And I'm going to say contains keywords mark 8, which is related to our top secret project. And then we're going to update that. Now, while that's updating, I want to come back in here and show you something. I'm going to create a new session policy, and next we're going to do block activities, and this is where a ton of cool stuff happens. So in just a moment I'll show you that, but let's come back here and let's log back in again, mail.google.com, /a/sosman.org, takes us straight to our Azure AD sign-in page, and get authenticated here. Again, we're doing this from a non-managed device. So this could be somebody, using their personal MacBook or personal Windows laptop or whatever, trying to get work done on a Sunday afternoon. And it's going to audit all their activity. And that's just that activity log I was showing you all before. And then once we get signed in here, let's go to Google Drive. And then let's try to now download this employee data. And it should let me. Yep, see that? It just allowed me to do it. So now let's try this again, but we're going to download this internal presentation, which contains the keywords Mark 8. So that might be like a top secret project or something I'm working on. So if I go to File and download this, boom, blocked. It scanned the data. It saw that it matched the sensitive information type, or it saw that it matched the DLP policy rather, and it's going to block it. And there it is telling me that it's been blocked. Pretty cool. So now if we go back to MCAS for a second and we go to activity log, here we can see that somebody tried to download that file and it was blocked. And that was with the previous policy. So it does get audited there or logged there. And I could also have it create an alert if I wanted it to, which my alert hasn't updated yet. So that's pretty cool. So, and then there's where I edited the session policy. So all activity in MCAS, all administrative activity also gets logged. So now let's go back to our policies here and let's do this again. So we're going to do conditional access. Let's modify that policy and let's do block activities. And so again, if you're trying to use this, if you're trying to use Google Cloud and you're using it from a non-managed device and you're trying to copy data or maybe even print data, then we could inspect it. If it contains the keywords Mark 8, then, block it. But I'm just going to say block everything. And I'm going to say not allowed to copy, paste, or print when using a personal device. And then let's update that. So now that should be, whoops. I guess I did that too fast. Let's do it one more time. Block activities, copy and print. And we're going to block, and I'm going to say not allowed to copy, paste, or print when using a personal device. And update. I'm getting a little trigger happy here. So we'll let that finish processing. There it is, just finished. And then we're going to give it just a few moments, and then we're going to try to test this again. So let's go ahead and open up an in private window and browse to mail.google.com/a/sosman.org. Get signed in here. MFA. Now I'm just showing you examples. In the real world, you might have different requirements. Some of the user experience might look a little different because of how you have your policies configured. But I'm just kind of giving you an idea here of art of the possible when you have MCAS used with Google Workspace. Okay, so now that I'm signed in, let's go to Google Drive. And let's try to copy data out of this presentation. So I'm just going to highlight. I'm going to right click, choose copy, and the action has been blocked. If I do a Control C, it's been blocked. So I cannot copy data out of this. Pretty cool. So now if we come back and we look at the last type of control here, it's control file upload. This is really awesome. And I like this because you can inspect a file upon upload. So if they're trying to upload malware, boom, let's block it. If they're trying to upload something that maybe contains some kind of sensitive data in it, then I can block it. All sorts of interesting things can be done here. Something I've seen people do is they will create a custom sensitive information type and it'll match like a keyword or something. And so if they try to upload a file that contains that keyword, then block it. Something else I've seen people do is they will choose a filter here and they'll say, well, if the document does not contain a classification label, then don't allow you to upload it. So that means before you upload, you have to assign a classification label. All sorts of interesting permutations can be done there. So folks, that's a session policy. That is Conditional Access App Control, basically this tab here, used with Google Workspace. That's pretty cool, right? So I've shown you a lot of what's possible here with Google Workspace and Microsoft Cloud App Security. I haven't shown you everything. I'd probably keep you here for a couple more hours, and I respect your time way too much. But I'll put a link to this document in the video description. You can peruse through it. But there's a lot of cool stuff you can do here. So please consider setting this up if you're using Google Workspace, explore it, and have fun. It may help you meet some of your requirements. Alrighty, well, hey, there's a lot more videos coming. I really appreciate your time on this one. So go ahead and click subscribe if you found value in this, and we'll see you all in the next video. Take care.